Reddeos presents r/AskReddit. If you enjoy the video, show your support by commenting, liking and subscribing to the channel. Older generations of Reddit, who were the I don't use computers people of your time. My grandpa used to tell me that he was basically set for life because he learned to read and write. Mass illiteracy wasn't as long ago as we like to think. Digital clocks are lazy. My grandfather refused to get a VCR. But not because he was a Luddite. VCRs were all made in Japan and he had fought in the Pacific in World War II, so he refused to buy anything Japanese. My grandmother didn't like to use the remote control for her television, because she was afraid it would break somehow and function as a laser dangerous enough to set things on fire. No car of mine will have electric windows. You're asking for trouble. Uncle Fred. My grandparents were the first people to have a television in their neck of the woods, rural NC in the 1950s. A big deal back then. Grandma told a story how when riding on a bus back from work one day, and a couple of her neighbors were on there too. They were talking about how the Blake Burners got one of them fancy TVs. Saying how it was an evil thing and would simply bad of them to buy one, and that they, the neighbors, were wise enough never to get one. Of course, they knew my grandmother was on the bus with them, as they said it really loud so she would hear them. Petty jealousy from them made my grandma run off the bus in tears. Story goes that Grandpa, a mechanic who was doing well enough they could buy a TV, was so livid that he refused to work on these neighbors' vehicles for decades. He was the only mechanic around for almost 20 miles, which then was an hour drive from anywhere else. Edit 1, wanting to stay semi-anonymous, Western NC, near Boone. Edit 2, my first silver. Thank you, stranger. Color TV. When they became common in the mid-60s, a lot of older people believed they emitted harmful rays. When Mom finally got one circa 1972, it was kept in her bedroom and we were ushered in to watch it only on special occasions. And we had to sit at least 10 feet away. My grandaunt still believes that 15 is the age of adulthood, that schooling isn't necessary beyond that point. She grew up in a time when literacy wasn't a given. My grandmother is 89. When she was a kid, she had an uncle who hated cars. He called them machines and refused to drive one. It could have been job security though, her whole family worked for the railroad. Some people still had outdoor toilets and were laughing at those who had them installed inside because they are their own houses. My grandmother is 97 and told me about people who would refuse to get air conditioning or drink sodas, because they the devil's work. She grew up on a farm in a 2-room house with 11 family members living in that house. She always had sodas and the AC rocking and rolling all summer. Back in the 80s I knew an old lady who used one of those, really old toasters, that could only toast one side of the bread at a time. As a present, we went out and bought her a modern pop-up toaster, but she wouldn't use it. She preferred to use her old one. My dad once told me a story about his grandmother refusing to fly in planes because she didn't want to get her hair all messed up from the wind. I don't read novels. My grandfather thought they were a plot by the elites to both ruin our eyesight and keep us locked away in a fantasy world. When remote control TVs came out, I suggested that my father buy one, and he said, "It will be a cold day in when I'm too lazy to tell one of you boys to get up and change the channel." It was such an amazing sentence that I committed it to memory, and I still remember it word for word 50 years later. My 89-year-old mom pays for cable but insists on watching only PBS and occasionally NBC, CBS or ABC. The other channels are too much technology to find on the remote. She also buys multiple boxes or cans of food, dates them in Sharpie marker, records the price, less coupon or sale special, and has a rack of all her finds. She will never eat all the oatmeal or beans in our collective lifetimes. But she was a Depression-era child, so I get why the urge to stock up on food is strong. My grandmother drinks only hot decaf coffee. 95 degrees with 100% humidity. Hot decaf coffee. Feeling parched after a day of hard work. Hot decaf coffee. And what to drink with your hamburger and French fries. Hot decaf coffee. Every meal, every day. When I was growing up, we never had ice. That was a luxury. Cold drinks aren't good for your stomach. Edit, grandmas from the States. Grew up during the Depression. My senior year of high school, I had a series of newspaper articles in the local paper explaining how the web wasn't a fad, and wasn't going away. Nobody but one guy at the paper believed it. It was 1995. I am the web designer for a local organization. Their treasurer refuses to accept card payment via their website. People have to print out forms, fill them out and post them with a check. I also get paid by check with a handwritten note. They would be a much more popular and successful business if they just modernized a little. Grandfather thought graduating high school was a big deal. He graduated in 1941 and was the first in his family. We had a great aunt who hated using the washing machine and claimed it never cleaned the sheets properly. I said at one time I would never buy CDs. I liked albums and tapes too much. I never got rid of the albums and tapes, but I have many CDs also. I have a co-worker about 52 refuses to use a computer because he caught his wife sexting in a chat room on their computer, so he destroyed it. When I was a kid, late 50s early 60s, seat belts in cars were an option. Lots of people thought they were unnecessary and refused to pay extra for them. Heaters and windshield defoggers were likewise optional. My parents bought a new 1964 Plymouth Valiant and didn't get the option. My grandparents laughed at the idea of a mobile phone or sending messages through the phone line when fax machines were a thing. My grandparents didn't like computers, they still had a typewriter or wrote by hand. I was given a typewriter as a kid, but by then I was using Windows 95. My grandparents refused to get an answering machine. My mother, who has a smartphone and uses email, still refuses to communicate via text messages. My mom was just telling me about when answering machines were new, and how people were so fearful of them and refused to leave a message. She got promoted at a job because she didn't mind calling clients and leaving messages. My Depression-era parents refused to ever have a /C because it seemed frivolous and unnecessary, and my dad chose seatbelts as the symbol of government overreach and refused to ever wear one. In 1980, we took a family trip from VA to STL, edited to Clarify, Virginia to St. Louis, Missouri, US, and back with 4 kids in the bed of a pickup truck. I'll never own one of those horseless carriages. When I come out of the saloon, at least the horse knows the way home. My dad is 65. He remembers old folks complaining about the forward pass in football. I was told constantly in school that I won't have a calculator around all the time. I got made fun of for taking typing class. Only girls type. I had just started geeking out on BBCs on my Atari 800 XL, all my friends had Commodore 64s. So I couldn't trade games with them and I had to type in my games from Byte magazine. I just wanted to get my games in faster. It's a good skill to have now. You Matt. My grandparents refused to buy Japanese or German cars. They'd complain about the price of gas while driving cars that were unable to pass a gas station due to their humongous curb weights and 400+ cubic inch engines. When my uncle retired from Ford, he bought a Honda Accord and my grandpa about threw a fit. At that time, Honda offered a 7-year 100k mile warranty while the domestic brands only had 3 years and 36k miles. He wanted reliable and he got it. My grandma says when she was younger there were still some people who were judgmental about the introduction of any anesthetics in childbirth. On the grounds that Eve was supposed to suffer in the Bible during childbirth for tempting Adam, so all women should suffer for that. Crazy religious people have been around forever. I remember people's parents not having microwaves, although by the time I was growing up that was pretty rare. The convenience had won over almost everyone by then. I still have a wall phone in my kitchen. A young woman at my workplace asked me in all innocence if I sell my house, will the new owners be forced to have a landline, too? Touch tone dialing. My mom refused to pay the $1 and change a month to have it. She finally caved in around 2002. Edit, since several have asked, touch tone was a keypad, much like what almost every phone is now. Before that it was a rotary dial phone. I had a professor in college that taught building systems. He was like 80 years old. Knew all the new ways to build a structure. Never used CAD. All of his details and plans were hand-drawn. I've taught a couple of classes on how to use more advanced functions in CAD. None of my students had ever even seen a French curve before. I was purposely taught how to hand draft in high school, 2007, before I learned CAD. Anyone under age 60 shouldn't be able to use the computer excuse. Computers have been common in the workplace for nearly 30 years now. My brother still won't wear his seat belt. I have the right not to. Yeah. You dying in an auto accident, leaving your daughters without a father will sure show the government who's boss. /S. Edit, I completely forgot my mother also refuses to wear a seat belt. I probably forgot because she's much less vocal about it. Her reason is different, she thinks they're unsafe and she just doesn't like them. /Gemid reminded me of this. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment, like and subscribe.